Okay, my name is Jim Vieira. I'm an author, researcher, and world explorer. Today I want to talk about one of my favorite subjects, the idea of lost cities of the Southwest of the United States. I've spent the last 15, 20 years looking into archaeological mysteries around the planet, visiting megalithic sites, and here are some of the areas that I visited, like Karnak in Brittany. Being a stonemason and an engineer, I'm particularly fascinated with ancient stonework, how these sites were built, and frankly entertaining ideas that there was a lost civilization that is responsible for a lot of the megalithic masterpieces you find around the planet. Right here I'm at Pumapunku with an awesome cat shirt. And looking at the site, you see a technology that was used that was beyond the capability of the peoples attributed with their construction, as far as I'm concerned. You have interior cuts in shaved planes that look like diamond saws almost used on them. There are drill holes and the air marks of, once again, a technology that was not available at the time. So it gets me thinking about these ideas of lost civilizations that the mystics like Edgar Cayce had spoke about. So I am a stonemason by trade. My brother and I have done a series of stone constructions around Western Massachusetts. There's a stone arch we just built. This is old weathered stone from farmers' clearing piles that we reconfigured into this stone arch. And here's a picture of it now in the winter. We're also redoing 2 miles of stone walls on the road I live on, Bug Hill Road in Ashfield, the oldest road in the county. So we've been redoing, these were entirely obliterated. We brought in hundreds of tons of stones from old farmers' clearing piles. And you see we've been piecing them together. And we just recently completed the section, including lunky, so the water could flow through. So I've done a series of shows for the History Channel, Search for the Lost Giants, several documentaries looking for the lost colony of Roanoke. And in fact, working with an archaeological team on our shows, we found a massive, never before discovered Native American settlement that went back before colonial times. And we also found these lost copper mines that were searched for by the early English explorers, the lost mines of Ritno, in our last episode we did with the History Channel. So I spent a lot of time going around the planet, cutting through jungles and searching megalithic sites and scuba diving on ancient sites. I firmly believe that the evidence that I'm looking for, or the evidence that is going to prove this case of a lost civilization, can be found underneath the water, in these lost cities and places underground that haven't been explored, and under the remains of temple sites that were built upon by later races. I believe there is evidence that exists. There's this misperception that all of archaeology is solved, that the entire globe has been mapped and we've been everywhere we need to be to explore these mysteries, and that the standard scientific evaluations are accurate and incontrovertible. I completely and thoroughly disagree with that orientation. I really feel like oftentimes hidden in plain sight, there's a lot of evidence that speaks to a lost civilization with advanced technology in the past. So one of the things that Edgar Cayce talks about, the great mystic Edgar Cayce, who would go into a trance-like state and talk about ancient civilizations and give health readings, was that there are several sets of lost halls of records from Atlantis that were placed there by survivors of the last cataclysm that took place around 12,600 years ago, and that they were inserted in these sites, these lost records, that tell the tale of Atlantis. So it's something I've been searching for and other people have been looking into. One of the places that Cayce said that they were deposited was under the par of the Sphinx. And we know, if you're a fan of ancient mysteries, that Robert Schoch and John Anthony West have redated the Sphinx to probably around 10,000 BC because of weathering patterns on the Sphinx itself. Now, it's frankly geology 101 when you look at the site and you see the weathering patterns and you understand that it must have been at an age where there was these incredible rains that occurred. And it puts the date way back into antiquity. And then you have modern day Egyptologists who can't accept that idea, so they basically ignore, obvious science to fit their paradigm. Guys like Zawi Hawass and Mark Lerner, they're just like, this can't exist. And because it can't exist, we won't even entertain the idea. And in fact, we will ridicule well-respected geologists like Robert Schoch about his basically incontrovertible scientific findings. So this is what Casey had to say about the records in Egypt. For the entity's tomb, then, was part of the Hall of Records, which has not been yet uncovered. It lies between or along that entrance from the Sphinx to the temple, or the pyramid, in a pyramid, of course, of its own. Remember, there are 32 of these plates. Now, I know that Robert Schoch is currently searching under the part of the Sphinx where he did some testing years ago that revealed a chamber there and something within. And this is the way these problems get solved, If indeed these plates are found, these records are found, it will be history changing. If they find, like in the new void in the Great Pyramid of Egypt, if they find artifacts contemporaneous with the current dating, like 2750 BC of the Great Pyramid, then it solves the case. I still think the jury is out on when the pyramids were built, and new science will answer these questions. So I basically just ask for an open mind, and I rely on science to answer questions, but I don't use science to show me what direction to look and how to think. That doesn't mean that carbon dating doesn't exist, and science isn't a very valuable tool. Archaeology is a very meticulous and difficult science, and I have a lot of respect for archaeologists, but I just have a different view of history, a more oral tradition, mythological-based one. Also, in another Hall of Records is supposed to exist in ancient Yucatan. Now, John Van Auken and Laura Little and Greg Little took an expedition to Piedras Negras in Guatemala, where they believe the Lost Hall of Records lies. Casey talked about the University of Pennsylvania in the 30s doing an excavation here and pointed to this as being the place of the Lost Hall of Records. So this is Casey's story. Iltar, who was an Atlantean temple priest, went to the Yucatan, and he placed the Yucatan records in 10,600 BC in this temple. With the final destruction of Atlantis, the physical contour of what is now Central America was changed, as that land also experienced upheavals. The first temples erected by Iltar and his followers were destroyed. The records of Atlantis that were transported to the Yucatan have not yet been recovered, although the readings insist that this will eventually happen. The belief being there at Piedras Negras. It's a very tough place to get to. It's on the Sumacinta River. There's really no roads in there. There's looters, and it's a difficult place to do excavations. So hopefully some will be undertaken in the future to see if this Lost Hall of Records is actually there. Now, once again, to go along with the idea that everything hasn't been discovered, in fact, there are new discoveries all the time that are kind of shocking to orthodox science, like this 40-foot monolith that was recently found in the Sicily Channel. This man-made 15-ton, 40-foot high monolith was found that's astonishingly old in the Sicily Channel. So during a high-resolution mapping of the seafloor surrounding Sicily, researchers discovered an ancient treasure, a stone monolith spanning 39 feet, resting on the bottom of the Mediterranean. Stunned, the researchers sent down divers with cameras and took recorders to get a closer look at the monolith, which had been broken into two parts. They dove 131 feet down underwater in an area called Pantelleria Vecchia Bank, located about 37 miles south of Sicily. My brother and I have appeared on Josh Gates' Expedition Unknown as well. I just appeared on Megan Fox's new Ancient Mystery show, Legends of the Lost. And this is one of the investigations that we're trying to undertake on somebody else's show or an episode of a show we may do. But this diving on the site and mapping the area and seeing if there is more evidence here, I think would be particularly useful, because what you have is several features that suggest the monolith was man-made by people living during the Mesolithic period about 10,000 years ago. The archipelago disappeared underwater about 9,500 years ago, suggesting the monolith was erected before then. So the stone monolith is at least 9,500 years old. It could be vastly older. It could be 15 or 20,000 years old. And it really begs the question, where did the megalith builders come from? And in a second, I'll talk about Gobekli Tepe in Turkey, which is a site dated to 11,600 years ago. And the site is about 20 to 50 times larger than Stonehenge. It's a massive megalithic temple complex, but it's vastly older than anything that was once accepted by archaeologists. So we have new evidence that's pushing back the dates and kind of obliterating these old paradigms. So once again, I suggest having an open mind and looking to more mythological or esoteric sources to figure things out. Like in the case of Dwarka, where mythology meets reality, the sunken city of Dwarka, which was supposed to lie in the Gulf of Cambay, an ancient mythological city in India. So according to ancient Hindu texts, Dwarka was a skirmish ground for Krishna and the evil King Salva. As a Mahabharata says, King Salva attacked Dwarka with a flying machine. It is the description of the battle that draws the attention of ancient alien theorists. This idea that there was ancient technology in these battles that took place in the past, that there was some kind of nuclear-like weapons that were used at Mohenjo-Daro and other sites, is one that's promulgated by, believers that there was alien intervention in our past, which an idea I'm open to, quite frankly. All the ancient texts talk about these sky gods showing up and having, incredible technology, and I'm open to it. The entire universe, all it does is create life. It's like weeds growing through the cracks of an old city in cement. The idea that we're alone in the universe is one of the most kind of infantile and absurd ideas I find. That any patch of ground that can support life, it emerges in this universe, that's for sure. So there's a reconstruction of what Dwarka was supposed to have looked like. And here's a History Channel image of this ancient city, now submerged. So in 2001, students of the National Institute of Oceanography were commissioned by the Indian government to do a survey on pollution in the Gulf of Cambay. 7 miles from the shore, during the survey, they found buildings made of stone, covered in mud, and sand covering 5 square miles. And I will say, this is how a lot of new archaeological discoveries that don't fit the paradigm are found. In fact, it's not like somebody said, maybe this story is true, let me check here. No, that's a ridiculous mythological idea, and we're not going to fund that. We're not going to pay attention to your crazy ravings. But when, as a undue consequence or a side effect of doing something like a pollution study or a sonar scan, a survey, you often find sites like this. Here is a picture of the site. Some of the samples were sent to Manipur and Oxford universities for carbon dating, and the results revealed that some of the objects were found to be 9,000 years old. It is indeed overwhelming to find that what had been discovered underwater at the Bay of Cambay is an archaeological site dating back to 7,500 BC, and older than any previously claimed oldest sites of civilization. And this is what Graham Hancock has to say about the discovery. There's a huge chronological problem in this discovery. It means that the whole model of the origins of civilization with which archaeologists have been working will have to be remade from scratch. Now, I tend to agree with Hancock. I think we're completely backwards in our understanding of the past. There were high civilizations that were lost in cataclysms that resulted in starting from scratch with humanity. I think there have been several rises and falls of civilization, and that anthropology has the timeline of the creation of the human species and the emergence of Homo sapiens wrong. And I'll let science decide that as time moves on. These ideas that are considered ridiculous and controversial, I think will be more and more accepted over time. And if you went back 30, 40 years ago, you can't believe how much things have changed if you showed up in the modern world in the realms of science and archaeology and anthropology. So there are new mythological once thought impossible cities being found continually today. Like in Honduras, the lost city of the monkey god, which was thought to be a tall tale, has emerged as a reality in Honduras. And you have artifacts and temple sites that were recently found and written about in National Geographic. You'll also have a new LiDAR scan that was done in northern Guatemala that revealed this vast Mayan empire, and around 60,000 new structures were discovered, incredible walls, and it basically puts the Mayan population at millions more than was originally thought. So these new discoveries are occurring all the time. And here in Sanliurfa, Turkey, you have Gobekli Tepe. Once again, this ancient megalithic site that was decommissioned and purposely buried after roughly 1,000 years of use. Another incredible feat in itself. And the reason this has survived, because it was covered over. So I contend, because of the nature of cataclysms in the past, that a lot of these sites were destroyed and lost to time. And this one survived because of being covered over. And what was revealed with this incredibly sophisticated temple site that's probably 20 to 50 times larger than Stonehenge, with intricately carved columns and animal reliefs. It's really a really stunning work that has been attributed to hunter-gatherers. Now, I believe the idea that a transfer of technology occurred here, which is much more plausible, because some of the oldest enclosures at the site are the most sophisticated. So things seem to be in reverse. It seems to be a transfer of technology once again. So what you have at Gobekli Tepe is these relief carvings. What that means is you take these large pillars and you cut them down, and as a mason you have to make these reliefs as you press further into where the stone is going to lie. So it's a much more sophisticated form of stonework than just a stone pillar. And you have what appears to be astronomical alignments and astronomical understanding that took place at the site. So these hunter-gatherers who lived for thousands of years in the most rude and elementary ways, overnight, about 12,000 years ago, decided to invent agriculture, basically organize themselves around this kind of megalithic building, drop all their hunter-gatherer activities, and put all their resources into the construction of this site. It occurred overnight. That really doesn't make any sense. There is no evidence that this took thousands of years to get to this point. In fact, the buildings in the construction got more and more primitive as time went on here. Once again, a really backwards orientation, not what you would expect. So Andrew Collins has written extensively about this site, Genesis of the Gods, and if you read his books, you will quickly understand the level of sophistication that occurred here and the astronomical knowledge. So the first site we will go to is the legendary Lost City of Giants in Sonora, Mexico. Now, we covered this in our show, Search for the Lost Giants, and I will go through the story here. Here is the Sonora region that giants were reported back in the 1930s. Here is an image of the mountains where this lost giant city is supposed to have existed. In our book, Hugh Newman and I do a chapter entirely on the lost city of giants of Sonora, Mexico. So the story starts with the Dean of Archaeology, the head of archaeology at the University of Arizona, Byron Cummings, being involved in the discovery of over 8-foot skeletons in the Sonora region. And this account states, superstitious natives destroy relics of prehistoric supermen. So from the article, preparations for a hasty expedition into the Mexican state of Sonora were made by University of Arizona archaeologists today after they received reports that the superstitious natives were destroying valuable relics of an ancient race of supermen. So the native people who lived there were the Yaqui Indians. They were extremely fierce and independent, and all attempts by the US and the Mexican government to displace them have failed. So these people are the ones that were pissed that these people were digging into their ancient burial mounds, or the ancient burial mounds on their land. So one of several skeletons was measured at height, at 8 foot 3 inches in height. These remains, Dr. Cummings said, may prove one of the greatest discoveries in archaeological history. So this miner, G.E. Coker, and the scientists from the University of Arizona met fierce resistance. In fact, the Yaquis smashed the giant bones. Numerous 8-foot skeletons were destroyed by the rifle butts of the Yaqui Indians because these interlopers were coming in and desecrating the burial mounds in the area. And an interesting editorial was sent at the time. Nearly every issue of the paper the last week has had something to say about expeditions going to Mexico and the search for a race of giants. Why go to Mexico? Several years ago, Bill Singleton, a boss on the highway, told me while working on the road through Chino Valley, some human bones were dug up, which, when compared to those of the average man today, indicated that they belonged to a race of men who measured between 10 feet tall to 9 and 10 feet tall. Jess Keppel will verify the statement. Another interesting find in this section was one made several years ago between Dewey and Humboldt. A new piece of road cut into an old burial ground. Del Dave's, now dead, doing some digging there, found 2 skeletons lying side by side, each about 4 feet long and each having enormous heads. Beth Gray, a mining man of the section who saw the skulls, said they were so big that it would take a number 9 hat to fit them. So the natives of the region, in fact, native tribes all around the country, have legends of little people and giants. And a lot of these finds took place by miners and railroad workers and construction activities that unearthed these giant bones that were reported in the 1800s and the 1900s. So we get back to the story of the lost city of giants. And here enters Paxton Hayes, who we met his son on the show and talked about his father's finds. So he lived with the Yaqui Indians for 7 years, and he went into the hills of Sonora, where the Yaquis told him that this lost city of giants existed. So here is L.A. Marshall of the Detroit Press. He reports, one day this spring, Paxton C. Hayes, Santa Barbara ethnologist, will post down from the Yaqui-infested hills of Sonora, Mexico, and tell a tale that will set the scientific world by its ears. It will have to do with finding a lost city of giant men. While I was in Nogales, Arizona 6 weeks ago, Hayes, the discoverer of the lost city, came out of the woods to re-outfit and to present competent factual proof of the nature of his discoveries before returning to the site of the lost city, which is 11 days muleback journey from Hermosillo, capital of Sonora. Hayes had pictures of the mummified bodies of members of this race of giants. 34 bodies have been uncovered, and the smallest measured 7 feet 1 inches in height. He had pictures of the ruins of the buildings and samples of the burial shrouds, all in a fair state of preservation. Confirmation of the presence of the ancient civilization in Sonora came 2 years ago. Since then, Hayes' party has made 7 expeditions into Yaqui country. We stumbled onto the city through the luckiest sort of break, Hayes says. We camped one evening by a strange waterfall. In the night, one of the burrows broke away. We found him by the cascade in the morning, his tail pointing at the waterfall and his nose pointing at a tunnel-like opening in what would have been supposed a rock wall. The passageway cut straight through the rock. We walked through and in 5 minutes we're viewing a hidden valley never before seen by the white man. It was the kind of topographical formation that is known as the Blind Canyon in the West, being sailed on both sides by perpendicular cliffs. In the bottom of that canyon, we found the lost city of the Sonora giants. We found walls of ruined houses 17 feet thick and built of baked mud and bamboo. Now here is one of Paxton Hayes' pictures. When we spoke to his son, he said his father went in with like a flash powder camera and took 5 different pictures when he was there. And we, in fact, uncovered and bought on eBay the original press release photos of Paxton Hayes. We have the originals, and here is a picture of the lost city of giants. He took it with flash powder. It's funny, when we did the show, we were arguing with the producers. We did Search for the Lost Giants, and we covered this story. And one of my producers was saying, the photo almost looks fake because, you know, the flash powder that was used. And I said, I don't give a rat's ass. This is, you know, it's in the paper. Hayes, you know, we have many images of the site. And this image, in fact, was not used in our show, which kind of pissed me off, but I'll show you that we have other images as well. This is the lost city that Hayes found, and I'll explain a little further along that it has not been found yet, and we've been searching for this lost city, which would be in itself an astounding archaeological find in the Sonora Mountains. So here is the bundled mummy of one of the 7.5-foot giants, the original photo, and on the other side, this is what you have. You have a description, this mummy being over 7.5 foot tall. Here's the report. Paxton E. Hayes, explorer, has just returned after 7 months in the Yaqui Indian wilds of Sonora, Mexico, where as a friend of the Yaqui Indian chiefs, he made several startling scientific discoveries. He tells of a cave 450 miles inland in the Sonora Mountains, said to be larger than the Carlsbad Caves of New Mexico. In these caves, he said, were found giant mummies 7.5 feet tall. Corn buried with the mummies was given to Mexican agricultural experts who are now trying to germinate it. Scientists of Southern California are also trying to germinate the corn. Hayes is in Los Angeles trying to interest scientists in an exploration venture. The photo shows one of the giant mummies in the entrance of the cave. The mummy is 7.5 feet tall. The cloth and the rope used in the wrapping is a variety never seen. So here is Hayes, Paxton Hayes, with that corn. And here's another photo his expedition partner took of a huge gourd and a giant mummified head, along with the bundled 7.5-foot mummy, burial robes, and the picture of the lost city of giants itself. So here's a newspaper report from the Washington Post. Smithsonian amazed at discovery of 6.5-foot mummies in the cave. That actually is wrong. It was 7.5, but here's the article. We are informed of the following about Paxton Hayes and C.G. Barnes from the article. With several dozen snakes all alive and a burial robe of a prehistoric giant, quite dead, parked in their trailer, they stopped in Washington yesterday to promote interest in the unique fields of study. So they were greeted at the White House, and they took 10 California and Mexican rattlers and an 8-foot baby Mexican boa constrictor to the zoo. The visitors then dropped by at the Smithsonian with the prehistoric burial robe and a 4-legged stool, both of which they unearthed in a burial cave in northern Sonora, Mexico. The Californians explained that the cave, one of 18 which they discovered, contained well-preserved mummies of a race which averaged over 6.5 feet tall in height, up to 8 foot tall. The caves are scattered over an area of 450 square miles. Hayes, who has just returned from his 5th expedition to the caves, heard about their existence from the Yaqui Indians of Mexico. Now, Roy Chapman Andrews was an archaeologist at the Smithsonian during Hayes' visit, and he had a conflict with the idea of giants, as many Smithsonian scientists did and still do to this day. So he did not agree to fund his expeditions, and he did not support this idea at all, or take any of his claims as credible. So unfortunately, there wasn't a further scientific expedition led, although Hayes would go back to the site and this story would continue for 20 years.